Bob is a contributing editor to the New Atlantis, a fellow at the Center for Security Policy, and the president of Pioneer Astronautics, an aerospace engineering research and development firm. Today he has 9 U.S. patents granted or pending. In addition, he's the author of the critically acclaimed nonfiction books, The Case for Mars, Entering Space, and Mars on Earth. So with that, I give you Robert Zubrin.
Well, thank you, Ken, for that kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for coming to hear what I have to say, and more importantly, for what you're doing here at the American Enterprise Institute, because I think the kinds of ideals that you're upholding here are very much worth defending, and the work you do is very much worth doing. Okay. In 1941, October 1941, Adolf Hitler gave a speech in which he said, and I quote, "The laws of existence prescribe uninterrupted killing so that the better may live." The laws of existence. In other words, according to Hitler, genocide was not motivated by hate, but simply the laws of existence. It was simply the inconvenient truth that there wasn't enough to go around, and so some people had to be done away with. Now, where did this idea come from? It didn't come from Hitler. This idea had been around a long time before Hitler, and it didn't die with Hitler either. Okay? This, and what I'm going to do in this talk is trace out the genesis of this idea, the catastrophes that it wrought, both before, during, and after the Third Reich, up till today, and the threat that it represents to us today, because the threat that it represents is extraordinary. And I will also refute the scientific pretensions of this idea, both at its core and at a number of its principal manifestations. Now, what is this idea? The idea is something that I call anti-humanism. And the basic content of anti-humanism is simply this: that human beings are not creators, they're destroyers, they're consumers. They are vermin consuming fixed resources that exist outside of humanity. And therefore, their numbers, activities, and liberties must be severely constrained, and someone must be empowered to do the constraining. And it's that last bit that has accounted for the popularity of anti-humanism, because this idea justifies tyranny or expansion of power by elites or governments, and therefore people who espouse this ideology have never lacked for sponsors. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that anti-humanism is the only form of evil in the world. And in particular, what I am describing here is what you might call pseudoscientific anti-humanism, rather than anti-humanism motivated, say, by certain theologies or other things, which are also matters of concern, but which are a separate subject from what I'm going to address. Also, I must say that while in a number of the episodes that I am going to relate to you, and I will discuss a significant amount of history in this talk, although I'll have to do it very briefly because I want to get to the contemporary situation sooner rather than later. In the book, these historical episodes are discussed at great length, and so we can go into them there. But in a number of these historical episodes, you will see various atrocities committed by groups that can be fairly described as conspiracies in some cases. In other cases, they are broad political movements inspired by these ideas. But there is no grand conspiracy here. Rather, the villain of the piece is the idea itself, this ideology itself, which has been active for about the past 200 years, and which has insinuated itself, which has sold itself in various guises of various political costumes ranging from left to right, and transformed other movements, made its appeal to other movements ranging from feminism to militarism from laissez-faire capitalism to communism to anti-communism. All sorts of manifestations. It has taken good movements and made them bad, and it has taken bad movements and made them utter catastrophes. So what is the idea? Okay, well, we've explained that, and the first proponent of it, or the founding father, is Thomas Malthus. Now, Malthus was an intellectual in the employ of the British East India Company, and he put forth this idea that a population will always outrun food supply. Population expands geometrically, food supply arithmetically, therefore there will always be starving people, and you can't do anything about it. And this was pretty blatantly a justification for the starvation that was being induced in India by his employer through rack renting and taxation policies, and it was shortly after Malthus's death used by his students as a justification for the horrific starvation created in Ireland, and then later on the tremendous horrific famines that occurred in India in the last part of the 19th century as well. And now, there was no Irish famine as such. There was a potato crop failure. Ireland, all during the starvation, was exporting beef and grain. The reason why the Irish were starving was not because there was no food in Ireland, it was because the Irish had no money because of economically oppressive policies of taxation, rack renting, and prevention of development of manufacturers. And the same is true in India. And if you read the quotes from the people who were administering this horror, they're straight out of Malthus. Florence Nightingale went to the British governor of India and said, look, you've got to lift these taxes. These people are starving to death. And he said, if we did that, they would just multiply more and even more people would starve. Okay. So there you have it. Now, an important thing to understand is Malthusianism is utter bunk. Okay, it is completely counterfactual. It is not science. And this was apparent even in Malthus's time, and it's much more apparent today. For instance, if we take the writings of the world's current leading Malthusians, which is, for instance, Paul Ehrlich, who wrote the book The Population Bomb in 1968. Now, here it is, 1968. Okay, what I've graphed here is world population and standard income per capita. Okay, 1968, you got 3.5 billion people in the world. The average per capita income is $4,000 in today's money. Ehrlich says, look, there's 3.5 billion people in the world. There's hungry people today. In the year 2000, there's going to be 7 billion people in the world. They'll be starving in the streets, and not just in China and India. We have to just send them down the drain. It's going to be in the United States. We're going to have people starving in the streets. We have to have government-organized population control here right now. Zero population growth. We need to establish a Bureau of Population that will issue permits to Americans so that they can, if they want to have children, so we can have a one-child policy here. And a bill was actually introduced into the U.S. Congress by Congressperson Ottinger of New York to establish such an institution. Fortunately, it didn't go very far here. Unfortunately, it became policy in China. But anyway, think about this. It is the year 2012, and there are 7 billion people in the world. It took a little longer than Ehrlich projected, but okay, we got there. But how do world living standards today compare to those of 1968? They're much higher, not much lower. Okay, and particularly in China and India, the countries that Ehrlich said had to be sent down the drain, but also even here in the United States. Okay, so Ehrlich was wrong about the future. Anybody can be wrong about the future. But he was also wrong about the past.